The chill that settled in my bones wasn't from the autumn air, but from the silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, we're just really busy right now," Emily said, her voice a thin, brittle wire. "Maybe another time." Another time. It was always another time now. The visits had dwindled, the calls had shortened, and the warmth that once defined our relationship had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter frost. I used to be her rock, her provider, the one who always had a solution, a helping hand, or more often than not, a checkbook ready. Now, it seemed, I was just inconvenient. A relic of a past she no longer needed. And the worst part? I knew exactly why. I wasn't her ATM anymore. My life had been a relentless uphill climb, a testament to sheer will and an unshakable desire to give Emily everything I never had. My own father had walked out when I was barely a toddler, leaving my mother to juggle 2 jobs and a mountain of debt. I swore Emily would never know that struggle. So I worked. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, cleaning houses, waiting tables, anything to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. By my late 30s, I'd finally landed a stable, well-paying job in corporate finance, a position I clung to with white-knuckled determination until the day they gently but firmly ushered me into retirement. Our little house, the one I'd bought with every penny I'd saved, was always a sanctuary. The fridge was perpetually stocked with fresh produce, gourmet cheeses, and Emily's favorite ice cream. Her closet overflowed with designer clothes, and every summer she'd spend weeks at a prestigious summer camp on the coast. I rarely joined her. Vacations were a luxury I couldn't afford if I wanted to maintain her lifestyle. Instead, I'd take the extra shifts, banking the money, telling myself her happiness was my reward. When I was working those grueling years, chasing promotions and bonuses, Emily often stayed with my parents. They lived in a charming old Victorian in a quiet suburb of Boston, a house they'd inherited from my grandmother. I poured money into renovating it, transforming it into a dream home for them and for Emily. When the renovations were complete and my parents were settled, I moved back to our hometown, desperate to reconnect with my daughter. She was already in elementary school, a bright, vivacious girl with a quick smile and an even quicker wit. I tried to make up for lost time, spending every spare moment with her, trying to understand her world, her passions. I genuinely believed we had a strong bond. It was a delusion I held on to until very recently. Emily met Jason in college. He was a sweet, earnest young man, a budding architect with a quiet ambition. They fell in love, and before I knew it, they were planning a wedding. By then, Emily had her own small apartment, a starter condo I'd helped her purchase after she graduated. My parents had passed away a few years prior, and after their house was sold, I moved into Emily's condo with her, renting out my own small place to cover the mortgage. It seemed like a practical arrangement at the time. After all, I wanted to be close to her to help her navigate the complexities of adult life. Jason, bless his heart, wasn't exactly a high earner in the early days of his career. He struggled to find steady work, and the financial burden often fell on Emily, and, by extension, on me. Of course, I helped. Who else would? Every month, a substantial sum would land in Emily's account, a silent testament to my unwavering support. When their son, Leo, was born, my financial contributions only increased. I bought everything: the crib, the stroller, countless boxes of diapers, tiny designer outfits. Jason's parents, a well-to-do couple from a different social circle, seemed to believe that since their son and Emily were adults, they should fend for themselves. If they're old enough to get married and have a baby, they're old enough to figure it out, Jason's mother would often say, a dismissive shrug accompanying her words. I couldn't fathom such a stance. I knew the grind, the struggle, and I never wanted Emily to experience it. Emily and Leo visited me often, and I made it a point to see them at least once a week. I wasn't sure how Jason felt about my constant presence, but he never voiced any objections. I kept my opinions about him to myself. Ultimately, he was Emily's choice, and it wasn't my place to judge. Leo was growing fast, a happy, healthy boy who rarely got sick. Emily had returned to work, and their financial situation had improved considerably. Still, I continued to support them, a habit ingrained over decades. Then, the inevitable happened. I was asked to retire. I had reached retirement age years ago, but I kept working. The extra income was always welcome, and I wasn't one to sit idle. But the company had been hit hard by the recent economic downturn. Layoffs were rampant, and my department was no exception. My boss, a kind but pragmatic man, asked me to step aside to make way for younger, cheaper talent. It was time. The long hours, the constant pressure, it had taken its toll. Of course, my pension alone couldn't sustain the level of financial assistance I'd been providing. I explained this to Emily, telling her I could still help, but in different ways. I could pick up Leo from daycare, run errands, cook meals. She nodded, seemingly understanding. And then she disappeared. She stopped calling. She stopped visiting. My invitations were met with vague excuses, hurried apologies about being too busy. "Mom, we just don't have time right now, maybe later." That phrase became her mantra, a shield she used to keep me at arm's length. But later never came. Now her holiday greetings are relegated to a quick text message. My birthday, Leah's birthday, I'm not invited. I tried to visit them a couple of times, unannounced, but the reception was cold, unwelcoming. They didn't explicitly tell me to leave, but the message was clear: I wasn't wanted. I'm on the sidelines now, an observer in the life I helped build. I was needed when I had money to give, but now that my purse strings are tied, I'm disposable. It breaks my heart to think that my daughter only valued me for my financial contributions. I tried so hard to raise her to be better than that. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If this story is getting under your skin, subscribe for more real family exposés. This silence from Emily wasn't just painful, it was deafening. It echoed the emptiness I felt in my own home, a home that once buzzed with the laughter of my grandson and the familiar, if sometimes strained, presence of my daughter. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was truly overwhelmed with work, with Leo, with life. But deep down, a colder, harder truth began to solidify: I was no longer useful. And in a transactional world, usefulness often equated to value. One Tuesday, a day Emily used to bring Leo over for our weekly Grandma Day, I found myself staring at the phone, willing it to ring. It didn't. Instead, a text popped up from my neighbor, Carol. "Saw Emily and Leo at the park today. They looked so happy." A picture followed, Emily, beaming, pushing Leo on a swing, Jason standing beside them, his arm around her. A perfect family tableau. And I wasn't in it. The park was just 2 blocks from my house. They had been so close, yet so far. The sting was sharper than any spoken word. I decided I couldn't just sit by. I had to understand. I drove to Emily's apartment, the one I'd helped her buy, the one where I'd lived for years. The building was familiar, the scent of blooming jasmine from the courtyard, a bittersweet reminder of happier times. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No answer. I rang again. Still nothing. Just as I was about to turn away, the door to the adjacent apartment opened. It was Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly woman who always had a kind word. "Oh, Martha, dear," she chirped, her eyes widening slightly. "Are you looking for Emily? They moved out last month." Moved out? My daughter had moved out of her apartment, the one I owned, the one I'd helped her furnish, without a word to me. My mind reeled. Moved? Where'd they go? Mrs. Henderson frowned, a sympathetic crease appearing between her brows. "Oh, I'm not sure, dear. Just that they packed up and left quite suddenly. said they found a bigger place, something about Jason getting a big promotion. A big promotion. A bigger place. And I, her mother, was the last to know. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. I thanked Mrs. Henderson, my voice barely a whisper, and stumbled back to my car. The drive home was a blur of unshed tears and a growing knot of anger in my stomach. How could she? How could my own daughter cut me out so completely? I called Jason's parents, a desperate, last-ditch effort. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling were always polite, if a little distant. "Martha, so sorry, we're just heading out for our cruise," Mrs. Sterling said, her voice dripping with feigned regret. "Emily and Jason are doing wonderfully, though. They bought a lovely house in the suburbs. So much more space for Leo. Bought a house. Not rented, bought. With Jason's big promotion, and not a single word to me. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. They hadn't just moved, they had deliberately hidden it from me. They had built a new life, a new home, and it was explicitly excluded. The next few weeks were a haze of grief and confusion. I tried calling Emily, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate, then angry. She never called back. My text went unanswered. It was as if I had ceased to exist. I felt like a ghost haunting the periphery of my own daughter's life. Then, an envelope arrived. It was from a law firm. My heart leaped, hoping it was some kind of explanation, an apology. Instead, it was a formal notice. Emily was terminating our rental agreement for my old apartment, the one she'd been living in. She was giving me 30 days to find new tenants. The apartment, which had been in her name for years, was now officially hers, and she was exercising her right to manage it as she saw fit. The cold, legal language was a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil raging within me. She wasn't just cutting me out of her life, she was cutting me out financially too. The apartment, my safety net, my last tangible connection to her, was being severed. I remembered the day I transferred the deed to her name. She was just starting college, so full of dreams and ambition. "It's for your future, sweetie," I told her, beaming with pride. A head start. She'd hugged me tightly, promising to always take care of me, to never forget everything I'd done. Those words now felt like a cruel joke. I decided to confront her. I found her new address through a property search, a beautiful, sprawling house in a gated community, far from the modest apartment building where I lived. It was everything I had ever wanted for her, a life of comfort and security, a life I had worked tirelessly to provide. I drove there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The anger had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to demand answers. I parked down the street, watching the house for a while. Leo's bright red tricycle was on the porch. A swing set stood in the manicured backyard. It was a picture of domestic bliss, a life I was now locked out of. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked up the flagstone path. Emily answered the door, her eyes widening in surprise, then hardening into a mask of annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, unwelcoming. "I think we need to talk, Emily," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "About the apartment? About everything," she sighed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. "Mom, this isn't a good time. Jason's expecting clients." "Clients?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "So, your new life is too important for your own mother? The mother who gave you everything?" Her eyes flashed. "You didn't give me everything, Mom. You bought me. You bought my silence. You bought my compliance. You bought your way into my life because you couldn't stand to be alone. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Bought her? My sacrifices, my endless hours of work, my unwavering support, she saw it as a transaction, a bribe. What are you talking about? I whispered, my voice cracking. You know exactly what I'm talking about, she retorted, her voice rising. The way you always hovered, the way you criticized every choice I made, the way you made me feel like I owed you for every single thing. You didn't want a daughter, Mom. You wanted a project, a doll you could dress up and control. This wasn't the Emily I knew. This was a stranger, a woman hardened by years of unspoken resentment. My mind raced, trying to understand where this venom was coming from. What had I done to deserve such anger? I loved you, Emily, I said, tears finally blurring my vision. I only ever wanted the best for you. Love? She scoffed, a cruel smile twisting her lips. Is that what you call it? Because I call it suffocation. I call it manipulation. And I'm done, Mom. I'm finally done. She started to close the door, but I instinctively put my hand out, stopping it. Wait, what about Leo? Am I not allowed to see my grandson? Her gaze softened for a fleeting moment, then hardened again. Leo is fine. He has a family who loves him. A family that doesn't try to control every aspect of his life. And then the door slammed shut, leaving me standing alone on the pristine porch, the sound echoing in the sudden, crushing silence. I stood there for a long time, the weight of her words pressing down on me until the tears finally came, hot and stinging, blurring the perfect facade of her new life. I drove home in a daze, the accusations replaying in my mind. Bought me, suffocation, manipulation. Could it be true? Had my love, my sacrifices been perceived as something so sinister? The thought was unbearable. I had always believed I was a good mother, a devoted mother. But Emily's words had shattered that illusion, leaving me adrift in a sea of self-doubt. I spent days replaying every interaction, every conversation, searching for clues, for moments where my love might have crossed the line into control. I remembered the arguments about her college major, my insistence on a practical career path over her artistic dreams, my disapproval of some of her early boyfriends, my constant advice, which she often dismissed as nagging. Was it possible that my desire to protect her, to guide her, had been interpreted as an attempt to dictate her life? One evening, as I sat alone in my quiet apartment, the silence broken only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock, a memory surfaced. Emily, at 16, had been offered a scholarship to a prestigious art school in California. She was ecstatic, her eyes shining with the future she had meticulously planned. But I had intervened. It's too far, Emily, I'd argued. And art school? It's so unstable. What about a business degree? You could go to state, stay close to home. I had pushed, I had pleaded, I had even subtly sabotaged her application by forgetting to mail a crucial recommendation letter. In the end, she had reluctantly chosen state, her dreams slowly fading into the background. I had told myself it was for her own good, for her financial security. But now, looking back, I saw the flicker of resentment in her eyes, the quiet resignation that had replaced her youthful exuberance. It was the first major plot twist in my own life, a realization that shook me to my core. I hadn't just provided for Emily, I had, in my misguided love, tried to sculpt her into the person I thought she should be, rather than allowing her to become who she truly was. The apartment, the clothes, the summer camps, they weren't just gifts, they were gilded cages designed to keep her close, to keep her dependent. And then another memory, sharper, more painful. Emily, at 19, had confided in me that she was pregnant. Her boyfriend, a sweet but struggling musician, was terrified. I had been horrified. A baby? Now? It would ruin her future, derail her career, tie her down. I had immediately taken charge, arranging an appointment at a clinic, talking about options, about our bright future, about how a baby would be an insurmountable obstacle. I had presented it as the only logical choice, the only way to protect her. She had been quiet, withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with the pain I had chosen to ignore. I had convinced myself I was saving her. But was I? Or was I just saving myself from the inconvenience, from the disruption to the perfect life I had envisioned for her? This was the secret, the unspoken truth that had festered between us for years. The abortion. I'd pushed her subtly at first, then more overtly, until she had capitulated. I had told myself it was a shared decision, a difficult but necessary choice. But now I saw it for what it was, my decision, imposed upon her, wrapped in the guise of maternal concern. The weight of that memory, the crushing realization of my own manipulation, threatened to buckle my knees. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If this story is getting under your skin, subscribe for more real family exposés. The revelation of my own manipulation, my own selfish control, was a bitter pill to swallow. It was a truth so ugly, so contrary to the image I had so carefully constructed of myself, that I wanted to reject it, to push it away. But I couldn't. Emily's words, her anger, her pain, they were the undeniable proof. I had been a monster, a benevolent dictator disguised as a loving mother. I tried to reach out to her again, not with anger or demands, but with a simple, heartfelt apology. I wrote her a letter, pouring out my guilt, my regret, my newfound understanding. I acknowledged my mistakes, my controlling nature, my role in the abortion. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't deserve it. I just wanted her to know that I finally saw the truth. I sent the letter, my hands trembling, a fragile hope flickering in my heart. Weeks passed with no response. The silence was a heavy shroud, suffocating me in my quiet apartment. I fell into a deep depression, the days blurring into a monotonous cycle of regret and self-recrimination. I stopped going out, stopped answering the phone. I was a prisoner of my own past, haunted by the ghost of the mother I could have been. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I ignored it, assuming it was just a delivery or a neighbor. But the knocking persisted, growing more insistent. Finally, I dragged myself to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Jason. My heart leaped into my throat. I opened the door, my mind racing. Was he here to yell at me? To serve me with more legal papers? He looked tired, his face etched with a worry that mirrored my own. "Martha," he said, his voice low. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He stood awkwardly in my living room, his eyes scanning the space, a space he had once frequented with a smile. I got your letter," he began, his gaze meeting mine. "Emily, she didn't want me to come. She's still so angry." "I understand," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I don't blame her," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No, you don't understand. It's not just about the control, the manipulation. It's about the baby." My breath hitched. "The baby?" "The one she lost," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "The one you convinced her to get rid of." I flinched, the word convinced a fresh stab to my already wounded conscience. "I know," I said, my voice barely audible. "It was a terrible mistake. I've regretted it every day since." He shook his head, a strange, almost pitying look in his eyes. "No, Martha, you don't know. You don't know the whole story." He paused, taking a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "Emily, she didn't have an abortion." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My mind struggled to process his words. What? What are you talking about?" "I was there. I took her to the clinic." "You took her to the clinic," he confirmed, his voice flat. "But she didn't go through with it." "She couldn't. She walked out of that clinic and she never looked back." I stared at him, my mind a maelstrom of confusion. "But she told me." "She lied," he said simply. "She lied because she was terrified. Terrified of you, of your disapproval, of your disappointment. She knew you wouldn't support her, that you would make her life a living hell. So she lied. She pretended to have the abortion and then she ran." Ran? Where could she have run? She was a 19-year-old girl with no money, no resources. "She went to a shelter," Jason continued, his voice filling the void of my stunned silence. "A shelter for pregnant teens. She lived there for months, hidden away until she had the baby." My legs gave out from under me and I sank onto the sofa, my body trembling. A baby. My grandchild. A grandchild I never knew existed. "She gave him up for adoption," Jason said, his voice softening with a hint of compassion. "She knew she couldn't give him the life he deserved. Not then. Not with you looming over her, a constant threat." I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of this new, devastating truth. All these years, I'd carried the guilt of the abortion, a guilt that had shaped my every interaction with Emily. And all these years, she had carried the secret of a child she had given away, a secret born from her fear of me. "His name is Daniel," Jason said, his voice a gentle whisper. "He's 21 now. And Emily, she's been looking for him." This was the game-changing revelation, the climax of a drama I had unknowingly orchestrated. My daughter, my broken, resilient daughter, had been searching for the son I never knew she had. The son she had given up because of me. "She found him," Jason said, his eyes locking with mine. "A few months ago. He's a good kid, Martha. A really good kid. He's a musician just like his father." I could barely process the information. A grandson. A 21-year-old grandson. A musician. The irony was not lost on me. The very thing I had feared, the very life I had tried to prevent, had come to pass. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice a raw, broken whisper. "Because Emily is in trouble," he said, his voice urgent. "Daniel, he needs a kidney transplant. And Emily, she's not a match." My blood ran cold. A kidney transplant. My grandson, the grandson I had just learned about, was sick. And my daughter, my estranged, heartbroken daughter, couldn't help him. "I'm a match," Jason said, his voice cracking. "But I have a heart condition. The doctors won't approve the surgery. It's too risky." And then the unspoken question hung in the air between us, a silent, desperate plea. "You're her last hope, Martha," Jason said, his voice breaking. "You're his last hope." This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, hit like. It helps uncover more hidden family truths. The weight of Jason's words settled upon me, a crushing, unbearable burden. A grandson. A sick grandson. And I, the architect of his mother's pain, was his only hope. The irony was a cruel, twisted joke, a cosmic punchline to a tragedy I had written myself. There was no choice, not really. There was only the path to redemption, a path paved with sacrifice, and a love I was only just beginning to understand. "Get me tested," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The decision was instantaneous, a visceral, gut-level response that bypassed all the years of resentment and anger. It was the only thing that mattered. Saving him. Saving them. Jason's shoulders sagged with relief, the tension draining from his face. "Thank you, Martha," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Thank you. He gave me the hospital's information, the name of the transplant coordinator. He told me Emily didn't know he was here, that she would be furious. But he was desperate, and in his desperation, he had given me a gift, a chance to atone. The next few days were a whirlwind of appointments, blood tests, and psychological evaluations. I was a match, a perfect match. The news should have brought me joy, but it only deepened the ache in my heart. I was a perfect match for the grandson I had never met, the grandson whose existence I had nearly erased. The hospital scheduled a meeting with Emily, a mandatory counseling session before the surgery. I dreaded it, my stomach churning with a mixture of fear and anticipation. What would I say to her? How could I possibly bridge the chasm of pain and betrayal that separated us? She was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly in a chair, her arms crossed over her chest, her face a mask of cold indifference. She didn't look at me. She didn't acknowledge my presence. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. The counselor, a kind, gentle woman named Sarah, tried to facilitate a conversation, but Emily was a fortress, her walls impenetrable. She answered Sarah's questions in monosyllables, her gaze fixed on a point on the wall just above my head. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Emily," I said, my voice cracking. "Please, look at me." She turned her head slowly, her eyes, once so full of life and laughter, now dull with a pain that mirrored my own. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Because he's my grandson," I said, my voice trembling. "Because he's your son. Because it's the right thing to do." "The right thing to do?" She scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You wouldn't know the first thing about the right thing to do. You only know how to control, how to manipulate, how to get what you want." Her words were like daggers, each one finding its mark. But I didn't flinch. I deserved them. I deserved all of them. "You're right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I was a terrible mother. I was selfish and I was cruel. I took something from you that I can never give back. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone for it." Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging. "I can't change the past, Emily, but I can change the future. Please, let me do this. Let me save him." She stared at me, her eyes searching my face, looking for the lie, for the manipulation. But there was none. There was only the raw, unvarnished truth of my regret. For the first time, a flicker of something other than anger crossed her face. It was a flicker of confusion, of uncertainty. The fortress was beginning to crumble. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she said, her voice so soft I could barely hear it. "I don't expect you to," I replied, my own voice thick with tears. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want to save your son." The surgery was scheduled for the following week. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a maelstrom of emotions. I was terrified, not of the surgery, but of what would come after. Would Emily ever be able to look at me without seeing the monster I had been? Would I ever be able to forgive myself? The surgery was a success. I woke up in a haze of pain and medication, a dull ache in my side, a constant reminder of the piece of me that was now a part of him, a part of Daniel. Emily was there when I woke up. She was sitting by my bed, her face pale and drawn. She had been crying. "He's okay," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "The kidney, it started working right away. The doctors, they said it was a perfect match." I reached for her hand, my own hand trembling. She didn't pull away. She let me hold it, her fingers curling around mine. It was a small gesture, but it was a start. I met Daniel a few days later. He was a handsome young man, with his father's kind eyes and his mother's quick smile. He was weak, but he was alive. And he was grateful. "Thank you," he said, his voice raspy. You saved my life." I couldn't speak. I could only nod, my heart overflowing with a love I had never known, a love that was pure and unconditional. My recovery was slow but steady. Emily was there every day, a quiet, constant presence. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer a weapon. It was a space for healing, for understanding. One afternoon, as I was staring out the window, watching the leaves fall from the trees, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. I turned to look at her, my heart skipping a beat. "For what?" "For shutting you out," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "For not telling you about Daniel. For everything." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said, my own eyes welling up. "I'm the one who's sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry." And then, for the first time in years, she hugged me. She wrapped her arms around me and she sobbed, her body shaking with the weight of all the years of pain and secrets. I held her close, my own tears soaking her hair, and I knew in that moment that we were going to be okay. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The scars were still there, deep and jagged, but they were healing. The trust once shattered was slowly being rebuilt, piece by piece. It was a long, arduous process, but we were doing it together. I sold my apartment and moved into a small cottage near Emily and Jason's house. I saw Leo and Daniel almost every day. I was a grandmother, a real grandmother, not just a checkbook. I was a part of their lives, a part of their family. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world is asleep, I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations. I think about the choices I made, the mistakes I made, the pain I caused. And I am grateful, so incredibly grateful for the second chance I was given. A second chance to be a mother, a second chance to love.